This is the Ted Wallachin Podcast. Brought to you by Tom's Place. For the finest in men's clothing at unbeatable prices, it's Tom's Place at 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Tom's Place will suit you. And Halenda's, the meat people. Enjoy their award-winning products at selected Metro, Sobeys, Fortino's, and Foodland locations. Halenda's, the way sausage should taste. And now, here's Ted.
Special guest this week is an expert gardener, radio and television broadcaster, and author of more than 24 books. In addition, he is the founding chair of the Highway of Heroes Tribute. Along with his son, Ben, they host a podcast entitled The Green File and are the owners of Cullen Foods. Mark Cullen, how are you?
I'm doing great, Ted. It's so good to hear from you again. It's been a while.
Well, it's nice to chat with you. Before we get into everything that you've done, everything you are doing, let us go back here for a little bit and talk about the origins of Wheel and Cullen and how old are you when all that began?
Well, the origins of Wheel and Cullen. You know, a lot of your listeners will go, what? They won't even know what you're talking about. Because I sold Wheel and Cullen 18 years ago. It would be May 1st, coming up to my nearest competitor, Sheridan Nurseries. So for the benefit of listeners who are youngish and may not know what that's all about, I did own a chain of 6 retail garden centers in the Toronto area. My dad had started them in the 1940s. I took them over in 1988 after working with my dad for 10 years, and I sold them in 2003. So it was really 19 years ago. Now I do the math.
Right.
And yeah. I don't know what more you'd like to hear.
I think that took a lot of people by surprise because you guys were doing so well, along with Miniature Village. I know I was taken by surprise, to be honest with you, because you guys were doing so well.
That was one of the reasons why I sold it, because we were doing well. I'll be honest with you. We were doing really well. And it's not an easy way to make a living, as anybody in the business can tell you. But Wheel and Cullen had 5 locations of our 6 in the east end of Toronto, and Sheridan, run by the Stenson family, all good friends of mine. And we were on speaking terms, and we worked on boards together in our industry association, Landscape Ontario. And, you know, we just knew each other, right? And they had 5 locations in the west end of Toronto. And if you really looked at the Sheridan business model, and you looked at the Wheel and Cullen business model, they had like 80% in common. They were not clones of one another, but they were very, very close and serving the same market. So the president at that time, Bill Stenson, and I agreed from the get-go, we need to bring the 2 chains together and work together. I don't know how we're going to do that, Bill, but we're going to do it. And Bill said, yeah, well, we will figure it out. Well, you know what? It took us 3 years, Ted, to figure it out. And when we did finally figure it out, it was the best thing I ever did. It was wonderful because all those full-time permanent employees, and there are 150 of them, moved over to Sheridan, and for the most part, they all thrived there, now in a larger organization with more opportunity to move up the ladder and do well for themselves, and some of them are still there. Like I like Art Vanden Enden, a name you wouldn't know, but he's just thrived, and now he runs the whole retail operation. So there's a lot of really good news that came out of it. And the year after that, 2004, I joined Home Hardware, and I started a whole new career. At 48 years old, I started a whole new career, and I had a fabulous time with the good people from St. Jacobs, Ontario, at Home Hardware, where I acted as their national spokesperson for lawn and garden for 16 years. And it was a fabulous experience.
I shop there all the time when we're in Streetsville. I find that I like the fact that it's family oriented. Like it's not like you're shopping at a major chain, a national chain. It really feels like a local place, you know.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you feel that way because it is a local place. The truth is, it's a very unusual business structure in that it's a wholly owned dealer-operated cooperative. So the only people that own shares in Home Hardware, and I'm not telling anything that's not pretty common knowledge. The people that own shares in Home Hardware are the dealers themselves.
Right.
They're the only people, evidently, that can. And when they're on TV or on your show and they're advertising and they say, and they suggest in their own way that you're dealing with a 100% Canadian company, they're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And, you know, they're honorable. Every conversation I ever had with the president all down was first of all, very amicable. And whenever we came to an agreement, it was a handshake, and we had a deal. And they were extremely honorable people.
Excellent. I mentioned at the intro, Mark Cullen, my guest. You're the author of more than 24 books, like 28 books. Is that am I right? Is that a number? 28 books?
So
23.
Just barely less than 24 books.
Okay.
And of course, you're assuming they're all gardening books. They're actually not. There were a couple of biographies I wrote that I threw in there, and yeah.
Biographies of whom?
Well, one was about a guy named Hugh Beattie, whom I came to know because he was a founding director of Share Agricultural Foundation, a not-for-profit organization in Canada that's based a little north of Brampton in the farming community there. And what Hugh had done when he was 58 years old, this is hard to imagine. He was listening to the radio and he heard an interview with one of the guys that was organizing this thing, and they were looking for somebody to go to Brazil. Well, he'd never been south of the United States, and he called the guy up and he said, I want to be that guy. I want to go to Brazil and I want to teach the landless people what I know. I want to share what I know about farming, and if that's a benefit to them and if that's what you're looking for, then I'll do it. So they agreed that that was a good idea, and then he went home and told his wife.
Fascinating story.
And so Hugh was an amazing man. I love Hugh so much. He's been gone now, I think, 6 years. But he was a D-Day veteran. He landed on Juno Beach with all the Canadians in 1944. And he took me there for the 69th anniversary, Ted, of the D-Day landings. And I don't know that I've ever cried so much as I did during that ceremony. And, you know, he didn't shed a tear. He sat there like just kind of absorbing the whole thing. And I was just like a bag of dirt.
Wow.
It was great. So I said to him, we gotta write this down. He's telling me all these stories. And, you know, people that fight, people that are in war, they generally don't like talking about it.
No, you're right.
Hugh was no different. But being there in situ and being immersed in it and reliving his experience at Juno Beach and then the liberation, basically, of France, Belgium, Holland, and Germany, being there for all of that, he couldn't help himself. And all this stuff started spilling out that he hadn't even told his own kids. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, Hugh, we have to write this down. And he said, well, why? Nobody's interested in my story. And I said, let me ask you something. Have you told your grandchildren these stories? And he said, no. And I said, then when you're gone, how are they going to remember you? And how are they going to know what you learned from your war experience? And he said, when do we start? And that's how I ended up writing his biography. It was called Extraordinary. 2 words, extraordinary. What a wonderful experience that was.
I'm speaking to Mark Cullen. I have interviewed over the past 40 years or whatever, how many hundreds of years I've been in radio. I've interviewed probably a good dozen people who've written books about First World War, Second World War. And every one of them told me the same thing, that it's like pulling teeth trying to get a veteran to talk, either because it's too painful or they're too shy.
I think it's not shyness. Hugh was anything but shy. He was actually quite an outgoing and social person. But I don't think they want to relive it. They just don't want to relive it. And I kept reminding Hugh, the lessons what I wanted to know, Ted, was not like the Canadians went this way and the Germans went that way. I wasn't interested in tactics. I was interested in what he learned from the experience. So you leave in 1940. He got married 2 months before he left, and he comes back 5 years later. To the wife that he had left without seeing her in the interim. So how did that go? Well, not well. The short answer, not well. And secondly, what did you learn? So you had an experience that many of us read about, and we see movies, and we got Saving Private Ryan, and we've got a war going on right now in the Ukraine, and we can't even imagine what it's like to be there and to be in combat and to be under someone else's command. What did you learn? And that's really what the book is about.
So meeting and chatting with people such as him, is that one of the things that got you involved with the Highway of Heroes tree campaign? I mean, other than the fact that it's trees and that's your background, but is it meeting and chatting with people like him that got you to become the founding chair of Highway of Heroes Tribute?
No. I'll tell you what started the Highway of Heroes tree campaign was a deep passion that I have for trees. I've always loved trees, and we're only learning now, Ted, about the environmental benefits of trees. And I read everything I can about trees and forests, for that matter, and how they work and how they function, how trees talk to one another, how trees benefit humankind, because when we live near trees, we live better lives. And as you probably know, I write for the Toronto Star.
Yeah.
And I wrote a column, I'm going to say 9 years ago now, that I titled Dear Mr. Ford. And this was a letter to Rob Ford, not to be confused with his brother, the current premier of the province. And I was frustrated with that man. I was thoroughly frustrated. And I was frustrated because he actually had the audacity to say publicly that he didn't support the planting of trees because it didn't support jobs, that there were no jobs connected with the planting of trees. And I thought, okay, this is the guy that takes 2,500 phone calls, private phone calls a year, right? Maybe he'll take mine. Well, he wouldn't. So I delivered a letter to him, and he didn't answer my letter. So I thought, okay, next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to write a column in the Star, and I'm going to write a letter to Mr. Ford explaining to him in very clear terms and very calmly, I explained why we need more trees in the city of Toronto. We need to double this tree canopy because it's been in decline since the early 60s. And I didn't hear from Mr. Ford, but I did hear from 8 different not-for-profit tree planting organizations. And so I organized them into a meeting at the Toronto Botanical Garden, and we created a new organization called Trees for Life. And what we wanted to do, our ambition, Ted, was to double the urban tree canopy across the country. The urban tree canopy, where people live, work, and play. And we talked for almost 2 years, and we were getting nowhere because, frankly, we were trying to do too much at once. And then Tony DiGiovanni, the executive director of Landscape Ontario, put up his hand one day, and he said, we just reforested the Veterans Memorial Parkway in London, Ontario. Why don't we reforest the Highway Heroes? And I'm chairing, and I look around the table, and there's 15 different organizations sitting at the table. I said, who here is in favor of reforesting the Highway Heroes? And I got about 4 people put up their hands. And those same 4 people are with us today. And what we did was we decided we would plant a tree on the Highway of Heroes, which runs between CFB Trenton and the coroner's office in Toronto, 170 kilometers, 117,000 trees we've planted on the Highway of Heroes. 1 tree for every Canadian lost at war since the War of 1812, and 1.8 million more on the other side of the farmer's fence. Why 1.8 million? Because 1.8 million Canadians have volunteered for military service during times of war, including, of course, the Afghan conflict. So we got busy, and we figured out how much that would cost and how we were going to do it. And it was a $10 million campaign. and we've raised the money. We're now fully funded. I'm delighted to be able to report that we're fully funded, and half of that money, Ted, was raised $20, $30, $50 at a time by average Canadians who stepped to the plate and said, I want to help plant a permanent memorial to Canada's service people, military service people. And it's been a fabulous experience.
That's incredible.
It's opened my mind to so many new possibilities.
It's amazing you can raise $10 million and you didn't even have to get one truck and a convoy.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. There is not one person that I have told this story to or told the story to in the early days. And be honest, Ted, it was really hard to get traction in the beginning because it just takes a lot of energy to get a thing like that started, right?
Yeah.
Well, anybody I told our story to thought it was a good idea. And nobody, not one person, said it was a bad idea.
Oh, I think it's a terrific idea, and kudos to you and everyone else involved. So your next chapter is something called Trees for Life, which is your concept of doubling the urban tree canopy. You've raised, what, $4 million so far?
Well, we have. It's only a year old. So when we were fully funded on the Highway of Heroes, and by the way, we're going to plant our last tree on the highway, probably at an en route somewhere near Port Hope, this coming Remembrance Week. I don't know the precise day. We haven't nailed that down. But David Johnston, our previous Governor General, and his wife Sharon have agreed that they will plant the last tree for us. And that's going to be a very, very special, very emotional day for me. And so we said to ourselves, well, what's the next chapter? What are we going to do? Fold up our tents and go home? No, we are onto something here. And Canadians are realizing to a greater degree than any time in our history the great value and service that trees provide. They are nature's most efficient air conditioners. Yeah. And there's nothing created by the hand of humankind, nothing that comes close to the efficiency of cleaning the air and cooling the atmosphere like a tree. So we created Trees for Life, and Trees for Life is dedicated to planting trees where people live, work, and play. And the other thing we learned, Ted, was people, Canadians, are prepared to support the planting of trees, yes, but they're more prepared to support the planting of trees when we are honoring somebody. And in that particular case, it was the military. Mm-hmm. And so what we're going to do is plant trees for the people who have served us through COVID. And I'm talking about frontline workers and first responders. And frankly, even the people, we've lost 32,000 Canadians, Ted.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. We've lost 32,000 Canadians to COVID, and I don't think we've taken the time or had the time to really digest and grieve the change that's occurred in our country and in our world. And we can do that by planting trees. Trees they are not the ultimate answer, of course, to our grieving. But what they can do is, I believe they can assist us as we begin a new journey of recovery from COVID. And if we planted a tree for every frontline worker and first responder, those who have suffered from COVID and still live with symptoms of COVID, those that died from COVID, we're talking about, you want to guess how many trees that would be?
Millions.
3 million. 3 million trees. That's our best guess.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm 100% in favor of that for a number of reasons, because I lost a good friend to COVID. I actually had COVID as well and spent a week and a half in the hospital. And I watched these doctors and nurses and orderlies and everybody involved in the hospital. And you just stare into their eyes. You just see the despair and the anguish and the sadness in there. And I just... God, there was times when I was holding back tears as nurses were taking care of me, and I'm feeling sorry for them, not them for me, although they were. And I thought, my God, what a job. And for anybody to ever abuse them or to block their passage into a hospital, those kinds of people are overqualified for hell. You know what I mean?
Ted, I couldn't agree more, and I'm glad you said it.
Well, I mean it.
Ted Woloshyn returns in a moment.
Well, let's head down to Tom's Place, 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Tom Mahalik is there. People are going to be planning for weddings right about now, I would think, huh?
Teddy, we're getting a lot of phone calls, a lot of requests. And my advice for everybody who's going to do a wedding this year, do it early. Do your shopping early. Do your research early. Start shopping for your wedding suits, your groomsmen suit, the beautiful tuxedos. You got to do it early on. It's never too early to be ready. And right now we're receiving all of our spring beautiful groomsmen suit, spectacular tuxedos. So right now the inventory looks like it's still strong. But don't wait. Don't wait. I'm telling you, all the guys are saying, well, I got time. You don't have time. You got to start shopping for your wedding suits right now, and there's no better place than Tom's Place.
You got it. 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Hey, let me take a moment to tell you about my friends at Helenda's. They are the meat people. You know, I've been a fan of their products for years now, and without a doubt, they make some of the best sausage in Ontario. They are multiple award winners, having captured the Ontario's Finest Meat Competition's coveted Award of Excellence on 3 occasions, in addition to dozens of individual product awards. Helenda's has also received the Grand Champion ribbon at the past 2 Royal Winter Fair's ready-to-eat meat snack competitions. So whether you're preparing a charcuterie board or a full-blown sit-down dinner for your friends or family, you'll find Helenda's award-winning products at fine meat shops throughout the province, now including selected Metro, Sobeys, Fortino's, and Foodland stores, along with their 7 Helenda's locations. Their barbecued kielbasa is my favorite. On a fresh bun with horseradish, it is out of this world. But don't just take my word for it. Judge for yourself. On your barbecue, in your kitchen, or straight from the refrigerator. Helenda's, the way sausage should taste.
Now back to Ted Woloshyn.
Let's talk about... You and your son have a podcast. How old is your son now?
He's 30.
30. That's kind of like my son's age, a little bit younger. And it's called The Green File. So it's obvious what it's about, but give me a little bit more in-depth to it.
Well, you know, what we do is because we're gardeners and my son he came to me, he joined me in my business almost 6 years ago. And he comes with an agricultural background. He got a diploma in agriculture from University of Guelph, Ridgetown College, and then he got a business degree from Dalhousie in Halifax. And he went out into the corporate world for a while, and he was not especially happy in the big corporate world, and he was looking for something different. And I said, Ben, I've got all kinds of things going on, and I'd really like to work with you if you're interested. And so he joined me. So this kid has a great passion for food. He's 6'2", and he's bigger than me, and he loves food. So he started a food business called Cullen's Foods, and it's beans, black, white, red beans, and chickpeas, organic, Canadian grown, and it's Cullen's beans. I call him the botanical bean boy.
So the next time I have a falafel, I'll think about you and your son.
Yeah. I hope you do. And,
I will.
Here's the way millennials think, Ted. And I tell you, I learn something from my son every day.
Yeah.
He took the can of beans and he put a code on it. And he invites the purchaser of the beans, the customer, to go on his website, put the code into the website, and he introduces you to your farmer, and he'll show you a picture of the field where your beans were grown.
Really? Where are these products for sale?
That's a good question. He's got 150 independent retailers, like health food stores, those sort of things. Last week he just landed Fortino's, but they're not going to get them for another 4 months, and Whole Foods. But Loblaws have them. I'm thinking about the big chains. Loblaws have them. Sobeys have them. Sobeys have them. He's got 700 at the moment. He has 700 stores that carry them, and Fortino's is coming online and Whole Foods this year. So later in the year there'll be more.
And it's under the label CullensFoods.com.
Cullen's Foods, yeah. It's in the bean section, of course.
Mm-hmm. Healthy foods.
Canned beans. Yeah.
Healthy
he
foods.
started out with dried beans, and that was a little bit of a disaster. And then he realized, I mean, you learn as you go when you start a new business, right? 10 times as many beans are sold in cans as are sold dry. So it didn't take him long to figure out that he really needed to be in the canned bean business.
Were you surprised when he came up with that idea?
I was totally surprised. I mean, I know he's entrepreneurial. I know he's independent, like with a capital I. His mother's independent. I'm independent. His grandfathers were both independent. His grandfathers were both in business for themselves. So he's kind of got the pedigree, but he had, up until then, he had never really demonstrated his passion for being in business for himself. And so when he came up with the idea, I thought, okay, that's neat. But, time went by and I could see he was dead serious about this. And it all started with relationships that he had made with his farming buddies at Ridgetown College. And Ben was the only person in his class who did not come from a farming family. Everybody else did. And so he got to know these guys. He got to understand the farming culture. And Ted, there is a culture in the farming community in Canada. It varies a little bit from region to region, but there are common threads that farmers have. And Ben has figured that out pretty well, and he connects really well with the farming community. But being an outgoing, social guy, he's been able to bring a bunch of them together, including some organic growers in Saskatchewan. So they're not all in Ontario. Well, he started in Ontario. He's been out in Saskatchewan farming for farmers, and he found some that would grow organic beans for him.
And you, in your typical laid-back Mark Cullen fashion, is quoted as saying, "My son's idea, really, I'm the financial backer."
It's true. Yeah, the secret's out. He needed a little money, so I helped him with that. But the brilliance behind the idea is all his, and the inspiration, and frankly, all the hard work. And it's a lot of work.
Mark Cullen is my guest here. Your daughter started a new line of curated Canadian handmade gift website called foodandshelter.com. Tell me more about that.
Foodandsheltergoods.com. Heather, she's actually a landscape architect, but I think she's more a frustrated crafter. And she had 2 kids. She lives in Guelph, which is a great place for anybody that's a little green. You know what I mean? Like, it's a very environmentally responsible city.
Yeah, my daughter lives there.
Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. And you look at the gardens, people get rid of their front lawns, they put in perennials, they got wildflower gardens, they got bees. It's an amazing place from that point of view. So she's in a good place, and she curated Canadian handmade goods into an online store, and it's called foodandsheltergoods.com. So she just started this at Christmas, and she's really having a lot of fun with it. And frankly, I think the quality of the stuff she's selling is outstanding. I think it's underpriced. I keep telling her, you need to raise your prices. This is crazy. I can buy a handmade canvas bag for $45. Like, what's that all about?
Yeah, really.
You should see this thing, Ted. It's all reinforced, and it's amazing.
Are the goods available strictly online, or are they available in retail stores as well?
No, strictly online. I don't think she has any interest in. Yeah, and she's running it from her home. She is a beekeeper. She keeps bees on our country property, actually, and she's got 7 hives right now. So she does beeswax candles. She does honey. She does maple syrup, organic maple syrup. She does pillows, Yeah, I don't know, all kinds of stuff. I should go online again and look at it.
Were you a pilgrim in a previous lifetime?
A pilgrim.
Yeah.
Is that what you asked me?
Yes. Because everything you're describing here about what your background, what your daughter does, what your son does, it's like hearkening back to talking to somebody in the 17th or 18th century. And everything is like, it's that whole farm to table concept, you know?
Yeah, it's true. Well, if I was to go back to university, I would take history. I love history. I actually own a 1840s Pioneer log cabin made of virgin pine. I own one of those.
Really?
Yeah, and I think I'm going to sell it, tell you the truth, but that's another story. My history, Cullen is Irish, and my great-great-grandfather came over from Ireland in 1848, and there were 35,000 Irish came over that year to Toronto, ended up in Toronto, and the population of Toronto at the time was 20,000. So it was almost equal to the population of the city arrived that year from Ireland. And I'm eternally grateful to this country and to the city of Toronto for all the great things it's done for my family down my 5 generations, and now my children, that's 6 grandchildren, 7th generation.
You're an exceptional individual, and I've known that about you for as long as I've known you, from 20 years to 30 years or whatever.
That's
whatever
kind of you.
Well, and I mean that, Mark. I mean that. And I see the great work that you have done in the past and know what you're doing now with the Highway of Heroes tree campaign and the next chapter and all the other great things that you've done and continue to do. And I'm thrilled to call you my friend. And I appreciate you taking the time and chatting with me today.
Well, taking the time is the easy part, Ted, and seeing you again, hearing you again, just reminds me of all the wonderful times we had on radio at CFRB, where you were doing a Saturday show and I was doing the show right after you, and we would do the crossover together, and we had some good laughs. And this is just for your listeners. I want to do something. Can I do this for say? This is the Ted I remember. You remember how you did that?
Yes.
That was Ted. I don't know what you were doing with those papers, but every time you got on the air, you'd hear this crunch of papers, and you knew Ted was about to say something profound and useful. But Ted, you became morning man, of course, and I've just really admired your work. I love broadcast. I love what you're doing on your podcast, and I really value what you just said about our friendship. That's very special.
Well, I mean it. I truly do. I got to tell you, share one funny story. You and I were chatting on the air, and we were talking about having pets and what pets do to your yard, and the kind of damage that they can inflict upon your yard, especially when it's time for them to relieve themselves. And you were talking to me. You said, "Well, they got this great product out now called Whiz-Away." And
I'm amazed you remember that.
I couldn't stop laughing for about 5 minutes. I remember I kept thinking to myself, "Oh my God, I got to hear from management on this," because the two of us sounded like a bunch of 9-year-olds who couldn't stop laughing. It was such a childish humor. But I talked to a whole bunch of people after that. They said they were driving around in their car in tears laughing because Whiz-Away. What a great name for a is it still around?
I have no idea. You've reminded me it existed at all. I'd forgotten, to be honest with you. But,
there you go.
You know, that's one of the qualities of Ted Wallison that we have to appreciate, folks, is that he's in touch with the child within. And that he talks about 2 9-year-olds having, laughing over something as goofy as Whiz-Away. That's part of your charm, man.
Listen, again, thanks very much. It was a pleasure chatting with you. And, I look forward to see how the next chapter of Trees for Life works out. And I wish you all the best for that.
treesforlife.ca. And Ted, I got to get your address. I'm going to send you some beans.
Okay.
I'd like to know how that goes down.
Yeah. Chickpeas be fine with me, too. But I love beans.
Okay.
I do love beans.
Okay. Why does that not surprise me?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to send you the address for the Ukrainian fund too. And I thank you very much on behalf of everyone in Ukraine and all the people who have family and relatives there for your assistance in that matter.
Well,
I know
God
you didn't
bless
want me
them
to say that. I knew you didn't want me to say that publicly, but I thought I would anyway.
Ted, God bless them all. They are in our hearts and prayers, and I'm speechless.
Yeah.
By everything that's going on over there, I am left speechless. And every Canadian needs to, I think, we should ask ourselves a question. What are we going to do? Nothing? Or are we going to do something? And I personally felt I had to do something. Who do I know with Ukrainian roots? I know. He wouldn't stop talking about it. So I know Ted Woloshyn. He's very proud of his Ukrainian roots. He'll help me out here. And so you have, and I'm delighted.
You take care of yourself, Mark, and hopefully let's chat again soon.
Thank you.
That's Mark Cullen, man of many traits and many hats.
The Ted Woloshyn Podcast has been brought to you by Tom's Place. For the finest in men's clothing at unbeatable prices, it's Tom's Place at 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Tom's Place will suit you. And Helenda's, the meat people. Enjoy their award-winning products at selected Metro, Sobeys, Fortino's, and Foodland locations. Helenda's, the way sausage should taste. The Ted Woloshyn Podcast is produced by Joey Roselli. Technical production by Paul Gatt. Music by Bike Thieves. I'm Becky Coles. Submit your questions and comments to ted@twmedia.ca.